You've chosen to spend 2 hours exploring Princess Leia lore to sleep to, and you've made the perfect choice for drifting into peaceful rest tonight. As you settle in and let the day fade away, we're going to journey through the remarkable life of Princess Leia Organa, a woman who went from royalty to rebellion leader, from senator to general, always carrying hope through the darkest times. This is the complete story of one of the galaxy's greatest heroes, told gently to guide you toward sleep. The story of Leia Organa begins not with her royal upbringing, but with a secret birth during the fall of the Republic. She entered the galaxy at a moment of profound transformation, when democracy died and the Empire was born. Her mother, Padme Amidala, had been queen and then senator of Naboo, a woman of remarkable strength and conviction. Her father, though she wouldn't know this for many years, was Anakin Skywalker, the Jedi who would become Darth Vader. The circumstances of her birth were shrouded in secrecy and tragedy. Padme had carried her twins while watching the Republic she loved transform into something monstrous. The stress of Anakin's fall to the dark side, his attack on her when she tried to save him, had weakened her body even as her spirit fought to bring her children safely into the world. On the asteroid base of Polis Massa, hidden from the new Emperor's reach, she gave birth to twins, Luke and Leia. With her final breaths, Padme named her daughter Leia and expressed her belief that there was still good in Anakin. This hope, this faith in redemption, even in the darkest moments, would become a defining characteristic that Leia would inherit, though she wouldn't understand its source for decades. The medical droids could find nothing physically wrong with Padme, concluding she had lost the will to live. But those present knew better. She had held on just long enough to deliver her children to safety. The decision to separate the twins was made by Jedi Master Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi, two of the last surviving Jedi. They knew the children would be strong in the Force, potentially as powerful as their father. Together, they would be a beacon the Emperor couldn't ignore. Apart, hidden among normal families, they might survive to adulthood and perhaps one day help restore balance to the Force. Bail Organa, senator from Alderaan and loyal friend to Padme, had witnessed the Republic's fall firsthand. He and his wife Breha had longed for a child, but had been unable to conceive. When Obi-Wan approached him with the infant Leia, Bail didn't hesitate. He would raise her as his own daughter, give her all the advantages of Alderaanian nobility, and protect her from the Empire that would destroy her if it knew who she truly was. The journey from Polis Massa to Alderaan was tense but uneventful. Bail held the baby girl close, already feeling the fierce, protective love of a father. Breha's joy upon meeting her new daughter was absolute. They had wanted a child for so long, and here was this perfect little girl who needed them as much as they needed her. The official story was that Breha had been pregnant and given birth in secret due to security concerns. No one questioned the appearance of a new princess. Alderaan itself was a planet of extraordinary beauty and culture. Its cities rose organically from the landscape, working in harmony with nature rather than dominating it. The planet had no weapons, having destroyed them all after past conflicts, choosing instead to focus on art, education, and diplomacy. It was the perfect place to raise a child who would need to understand both strength and peace. Young Leia grew up in the royal palace of Aldera, surrounded by beauty and privilege, but also by purpose. Baal and Breha didn't raise her to be a pampered princess, but a leader who understood responsibility. From her earliest memories, she attended court sessions, sitting quietly beside her father as he navigated the complex politics of maintaining Alderaan's independence while appearing to comply with imperial rule. Her education was extensive and demanding. She learned multiple languages, studying not just to speak them, but to understand the cultures they represented. History lessons focused on the fall of the Republic, though the true story was hidden beneath imperial propaganda. She studied mathematics, science, art, and music, but her real passion was for politics and debate. Even as a child, she could argue her position with logic and passion that surprised adults. Breha Organa was more than just Leia's adoptive mother. She was her first model of female strength. The Queen of Alderaan managed to be both graceful and powerful, diplomatic and decisive. She taught Leia that femininity and authority weren't contradictory, that one could wear elaborate gowns to state dinners and still command respect in council chambers. Breha's influence on Leia's development cannot be overstated. The palace staff adored their young princess, but also knew she could be handful. Leia had a rebellious streak that manifested early. She would sneak out of lessons she found boring, explore parts of the palace that were off limits, and constantly question why things were done certain ways. Rather than punish this behavior, Baal channeled it, teaching her that rebellion needed purpose and direction to be effective. Her first exposure to the Empire's cruelty came when she was 8 years old. A refugee ship from a planet that had resisted imperial occupation requested sanctuary on Alderaan. Leia watched from a hidden spot as her father had to turn them away, knowing that accepting them would bring imperial retribution on Alderaan. That night, she found Baal in his study, weeping. He explained that sometimes leaders had to make impossible choices, sacrificing some to protect many. This lesson in pragmatic leadership was hard for young Leia to accept. Her instinct was to help everyone, to fight every injustice. Baal taught her that survival under the Empire required patience and subtlety. Open rebellion would only bring destruction. Instead, they would work quietly, building networks, gathering resources, waiting for the right moment. These lessons in strategic patience would serve her well, though they went against her natural impulses. By age 10, Leia was participating in junior legislative programs, debating other young nobles about theoretical policies. Her arguments were passionate but well-reasoned, showing an understanding of complex issues that impressed even seasoned politicians. She had a gift for finding the heart of an issue and expressing it in ways that moved people to action. Her training wasn't just intellectual. Baal insisted she learn self-defense, knowing the galaxy was dangerous for those who opposed the Empire. She studied various martial arts, becoming proficient with blasters and hand-to-hand combat. Her instructors noted her determination and fearlessness, traits that would define her military career decades later. The palace on Alderaan had secret rooms and hidden passages that dated back centuries. Baal began showing these to Leia as she grew older, explaining their historical purpose and their current use. Some hid weapons, illegal under imperial law. Others contained communication equipment for contacting other dissidents. She learned that their palace was a hub of quiet resistance. Her relationship with her adoptive parents was loving but complex. She called them mother and father, loved them completely, but always felt something indefinable was missing. There were no photos of Breha pregnant, no stories of her birth, and sometimes she would catch her parents exchanging looks when they thought she wasn't watching. She knew she was adopted, but didn't know the full truth. At 13, she began accompanying Bale on diplomatic missions to other worlds. These trips opened her eyes to the Empire's oppression beyond Alderaan's relatively protected borders. She saw stormtroopers enforcing brutal order, worlds stripped of resources, cultures suppressed. Each injustice she witnessed hardened her resolve to fight back when the time came. Her first act of real rebellion came at 14 when she secretly redirected relief supplies meant for Imperial forces to refugees instead. The operation was small, carefully planned to avoid detection, but it gave her a taste of active resistance. The grateful messages from those who received the supplies reinforced her belief that individual actions could make a difference. Education at the palace included learning about the Force and the Jedi, though only as historical topics. The Empire's official position was that the Jedi had been traitors who attempted to overthrow the Republic. But Bale taught Leia the truth in private, telling her about the noble knights who had protected peace and justice for millennia. She was fascinated by these stories, never suspecting her own connection to that legacy. Her teenage years were marked by increasing boldness in her opposition to imperial policies. During a school debate about resource allocation, she openly criticized imperial military spending while social programs were cut. Her teachers, loyal to the Empire, reported this to authorities, leading to her first official censure. Bale publicly disciplined her while privately expressing pride in her courage. At 15, she discovered one of Bale's secret communication devices and used it to contact other young dissidents across the galaxy. She began building her own network, separate from her father's, consisting of idealistic youth ready to resist the Empire. This early network would later become valuable to the Rebel Alliance, providing fresh recruits and safe houses. Her first romantic feelings emerged around this time, directed toward a young aide in her father's service. The relationship was innocent, consisting mainly of long walks and philosophical discussions about freedom and justice. It ended when the aide's family was relocated off-world, teaching Leia that personal happiness often had to be sacrificed for security under the Empire. The Apprentice Legislature was supposed to be a harmless program where young nobles learned about governance by proposing theoretical legislation. Leia turned it into something more, using it to build alliances with other young leaders who shared her anti-imperial sentiments. She was careful, speaking in codes and metaphors, but those who understood her meaning began to coalesce around her. Her 16th year brought increased scrutiny from Imperial intelligence. They suspected Bale of seditious activities and watched his family closely. Leia learned to perform the role of loyal Imperial citizen in public while conducting resistance activities in secret. This double life was exhausting but necessary, teaching her to compartmentalize her true feelings. A defining moment came when she witnessed an imperial massacre of peaceful protesters on a diplomatic visit. The protesters had been demanding the return of political prisoners, and the imperial response was swift and brutal. Leia watched in horror as stormtroopers opened fire on unarmed civilians. That night, she told Bale she was ready to move beyond symbolic resistance. Her father's revelation that he was part of an organized rebellion shocked and thrilled her. She had suspected something but hadn't known the extent of the network opposing the Empire. Bale was reluctant to involve her directly, knowing the danger, but Leia's determination and proven capabilities convinced him she was ready for greater responsibility. Her first mission for the rebellion was to carry encrypted data chips to a contact on Coruscant. Hidden in her elaborate hairstyles and jewelry, the chips contained intelligence about Imperial fleet movements. The mission went smoothly, but the stress of potentially being caught, of knowing that discovery meant death or worse, was intense. She returned to Alderaan exhausted, but exhilarated. Training with rebel military advisors began in secret. She learned tactics and strategy, studying famous battles and learning from the Empire's few defeats. Her natural leadership abilities flourished in these sessions. She could see patterns others missed, devise strategies that maximized limited resources, and inspire others to follow her plans. Her relationship with her parents deepened as she became their partner in rebellion rather than just their daughter. Family dinners became strategy sessions. Shopping trips were cover for meeting contacts. Every aspect of their lives was shaped by their resistance activities, binding them together in purpose as well as love. At 17, she began attending Imperial Senate sessions as Bale's aide, preparing for her eventual role as senator. The Senate was largely powerless, a rubber stamp for imperial decrees, but it provided valuable intelligence opportunities. She learned which senators secretly opposed the Empire and which were true believers. This knowledge would prove invaluable. Her public persona became increasingly polished during this time. She could play the role of diplomatic princess perfectly, charming imperial officials, even as she despised them. She learned to hide her emotions behind pleasant smiles and diplomatic language, saving her true feelings for private moments or encrypted communications. The day she turned 18, she officially became Alderaan's representative to the Imperial Senate, the youngest senator in galactic history. Her appointment was controversial, with many dismissing her as a naive child playing at politics. She would quickly prove them wrong, using her youth and apparent innocence to disguise her true activities. Her maiden speech to the Senate was carefully crafted to appear loyal while subtly criticizing imperial policies. She spoke of unity through diversity, strength through compassion, and the importance of listening to all voices. Those who understood her coded language recognized a declaration of resistance. The Empire saw only a young idealist who would learn reality soon enough. Living on Coruscant as a senator was isolating and dangerous. She was constantly watched, her communications monitored, her movements tracked. But she had been preparing for this her entire life. She used dead drops, coded messages in public speeches, and a network of seemingly innocent social contacts to conduct rebellion business. Her apartment on Coruscant became an unofficial meeting place for dissatisfied senators and their aides. Officially, they gathered for cultural events or social occasions. In reality, they were coordinating resistance efforts, sharing intelligence, and building the political wing of the rebellion. These gatherings had to appear completely innocent, requiring constant vigilance. The first time she directly defied the Emperor in the Senate was over the installation of new military governors with unlimited power. She stood and denounced the measure as tyranny, her voice carrying through the chamber with strength that surprised even her. The emperor's representative noted her objection with cold eyes, and she knew she had painted a target on herself. Her skill at negotiation became legendary even among her enemies. She could find common ground between disparate factions, convince skeptics to take chances, and inspire hope in those who had given up. These abilities made her invaluable to the rebellion, which struggled to unite various groups with different agendas against their common enemy. Romance seemed impossible given her dangerous life, but she found herself attracted to fellow rebels who shared her commitment. These attractions never developed into relationships, partly due to security concerns, and partly because she couldn't imagine planning a future when survival was uncertain. She channeled these feelings into her work, becoming even more dedicated to the cause. Her public image as a beautiful young princess worked to her advantage. Imperial officers consistently underestimated her, seeing only her youth and beauty, not the sharp intelligence and iron will beneath. She used their prejudices against them, extracting information through seemingly innocent conversation and flirtation she found distasteful but necessary. The network of spies she developed as a senator was extensive and diverse. Cleaning staff, communication technicians, even some stormtroopers who had begun questioning their orders. She protected these assets carefully, knowing that each person who helped the rebellion risked everything. Their safety was always her primary concern. Her relationship with other young senators who opposed the Empire created a new generation of leadership for the rebellion. Mon Mothma became a mentor and friend, teaching Leia the subtleties of political manipulation. Together, they worked to preserve what remained of democratic institutions while building alternatives for when the Empire fell. The theft of the Death Star plans marked a crucial turning point in her life. When rebel spies transmitted the plans to her ship above Scarif, she knew she carried the hopes of the galaxy. The plans revealed the Empire's ultimate weapon, a space station capable of destroying entire planets. Getting this information to the rebellion became her most important mission. Darth Vader's pursuit of her ship was relentless and terrifying. She had heard of him, the Emperor's enforcer, but experiencing his presence was different. Even from a distance, she could feel the darkness that surrounded him, the cold rage that drove him. She didn't know he was her father, didn't know that some unconscious part of him recognized her too. Her decision to hide the plans in R2-D2 and send him to Tatooine showed quick thinking under pressure. She knew capture was inevitable, but refused to let the plans fall into Imperial hands. Her message to Obi-Wan Kenobi, a name from her father's stories, was a desperate gamble that this legendary figure still lived and would help. Standing before Vader for the first time required all her courage. He towered over her, breathing mechanically, radiating menace. But she didn't cower. She stood straight, met his mask with defiance, and lied convincingly about being on a diplomatic mission. Even when he saw through her deception, she maintained her composure every inch the princess, despite her fear. The interrogation she endured on the Death Star tested her limits. Physical torture was combined with psychological manipulation, drugs that loosened her tongue, and threats against everyone she loved. Through it all, she held on to one truth. The plans were safe, the rebellion would continue, and her suffering had meaning if it bought time. When Vader and Grand Moff Tarkin brought her to the observation deck and she saw Alderaan through the viewscreen, her composure finally cracked. They demanded the location of the rebel base, threatening her home world. She gave them Dantooine, an abandoned base, hoping to buy time. But Tarkin destroyed Alderaan anyway, as a demonstration of the Death Star's power. The destruction of Alderaan was a wound that would never fully heal. In an instant, everything she had known and loved was gone. Her parents, her friends, her culture, billions of voices silenced. She felt it happen, though she didn't understand how, a disturbance that made her physically ill. But even in that moment of ultimate loss, she didn't break. Back in her cell, she mourned privately, but briefly. Bail and Breha would want her to continue fighting, to make their sacrifice meaningful. She transformed her grief into determination, her sorrow into rage against the Empire. When the door opened again, she was ready to face whatever came next, though she never expected it to be a farm boy in stormtrooper armor. Luke Skywalker's rescue attempt was both the worst and best thing she had ever experienced. His plan was terrible, clearly improvised, and he was obviously inexperienced. But he had come for her, this stranger who knew nothing about her except that she needed help. His genuine goodness and naive courage were so different from the calculating rebels and cruel Imperials she knew. Han Solo was another surprise. The smuggler was clearly only interested in money, selfish and cynical in ways that should have repelled her. But beneath the mercenary exterior, she sensed something more, a damaged idealist who had given up on causes, but not on people. Their immediate antagonism covered an attraction neither wanted to acknowledge. The escape from the Death Star was chaotic and dangerous, but also exhilarating. After days of torture and the trauma of losing Alderaan, fighting back felt wonderful. She took charge when the men's plan fell apart, shooting stormtroopers with grim satisfaction. Each fallen Imperial was payment for Alderaan, though she knew no amount of vengeance would bring her. Whirled back, the trash compactor incident would have been funny if it weren't so deadly. Trapped in garbage with walls closing in, arguing with Han about whose fault it was while Luke panicked, she felt oddly alive. These moments of absurd danger would become familiar over the years, but this first taste of adventure mixed with mortal peril was intoxicating. When they finally reached the rebel base on Yavin 4, she should have collapsed from exhaustion and grief. Instead, she threw herself into planning the attack on the Death Star. The technical readouts R2-D2 carried revealed a weakness, and she worked with rebel technicians to develop an attack strategy. Work kept her from thinking about Alderaan. The Battle of Yavin was torture of a different kind. She could only watch as brave pilots flew to their deaths, trying to exploit the Death Star's weakness. Each lost ship represented friends and allies, people who had risked everything for freedom. When the situation became desperate, she prepared for evacuation, but refused to leave until the last possible moment. Luke's successful destruction of the Death Star was a moment of pure joy amid so much loss. This farm boy from nowhere had done the impossible, giving the rebellion its first major victory. As she placed the medal around his neck at the ceremony, she felt something she couldn't explain, a connection that went beyond their brief acquaintance. The aftermath of Yavin was bittersweet. They had won, but at tremendous cost. Alderaan was still gone, and the Empire would strike back with vengeance. She threw herself into relocating the rebel base, knowing they had little time before Imperial forces found them again. Leadership came naturally to her now, born from necessity and refined by experience. Her position in the Alliance command structure was unique. Officially, she was just one leader among many, but her sacrifice of Alderaan gave her moral authority others lacked. When she spoke about the cost of freedom, everyone knew she had paid the ultimate price. This authority came with survivor's guilt that would haunt her for years. The development of her relationship with Han Solo was complicated and often frustrating. He would stay for a while, helping the rebellion, then threaten to leave when things got too serious. She was attracted to him, but refused to beg him to stay. Their arguments became legendary on whatever base they occupied, passionate disagreements that everyone could see were really something else. Her friendship with Luke grew steadily. He was earnest and kind in ways that reminded her of the best parts of her father, Bail. She found herself protective of him, wanting to shield him from the harsh realities of war even though she was barely older. Their bond felt familial, though she attributed this to their shared experience of loss. The search for a new permanent base consumed months. Each potential location had to be scouted, evaluated, and prepared. She led many of these missions, herself refusing to delegate dangerous tasks. Her hands-on leadership style inspired loyalty, but also concern from those who recognized her tendency to take unnecessary risks. The Empire's pursuit forced constant movement. Just when they would begin to establish routines, probe droids or scouts would find them. These relocations were exhausting, demoralizing, and dangerous. Equipment would be lost, people would be captured or killed, and morale would drop. Her job was to maintain hope when hope seemed impossible. Hoth was supposed to be their hidden fortress, a place so inhospitable the Empire would never think to look there. The ice planet was miserable, cold beyond imagination, but it was safe. She threw herself into making it livable, organizing supplies, establishing protocols, creating some semblance of normal life in abnormal circumstances. Her leadership during the Battle of Hoth showed how much she had grown as a military commander. She coordinated the evacuation while under bombardment, making split-second decisions that saved lives. When the shield generator was threatened, she stayed at her post until the last transport was away, nearly dying when the base collapsed. The kiss with Luke before the battle was impulsive, meant to make Han jealous, but it felt wrong in ways she couldn't explain. There was affection but no passion, love but not romance. She pushed aside her confusion, attributing it to the stress of constant danger. Only later would she understand why kissing him felt like kissing family. Her escape from Hoth with Han, Chewbacca, and C-3PO in the Millennium Falcon was a nightmare of pursued desperation. The ship's hyperdrive was broken, Imperial forces were everywhere, and they were running out of options. But it was also strangely intimate, the four of them against the galaxy, dependent on each other for survival. The asteroid field they hid in was dangerous beyond reason, but it worked. In those hours hiding in the cave that turned out to be a creature's stomach, she and Han finally acknowledged what had been building between them. Their first real kiss wasn't romantic in a traditional sense, happening in mortal danger inside a space slug, but it was perfect for them. Cloud City seemed like salvation after weeks of running. Lando Calrissian was charming and helpful, offering repairs and rest. She didn't trust him, but had no choice. Her instincts proved correct when Vader appeared at what was supposed to be dinner. The betrayal was expected, but still painful, another reminder that safety was always an illusion. Being Vader's prisoner again was different this time. He barely acknowledged her, focused entirely on using her and the others as bait for Luke. She realized this had been his plan all along, that they were just tools to capture someone Vader considered more important. The revelation stung her pride even as she worried for Luke. The carbonite freezing of Han was the cruelest thing she had witnessed since Alderaan. Watching the man she loved being tortured and then frozen, possibly killed, while she could only watch, was agony. His last words to her, "I know," in response to her declaration of love, were perfectly him, cocky and caring simultaneously. Lando's redemption came almost too late. His help in escaping Cloud City didn't erase his betrayal, but showed the complex moral calculations everyone had to make under the Empire. She wanted to hate him, but understood his impossible position. Protecting his city had seemed worth betraying strangers until he realized what that really meant. The loss of Han left a void that work couldn't fill. She threw herself into planning his rescue, developing elaborate schemes to infiltrate Jabba's palace. Every detail had to be perfect because failure meant death or worse. The plan that finally emerged was complex, requiring multiple phases and perfect timing. Her disguise as the bounty hunter Boushh was her idea. She wanted to be the one to save Han, to see his face when he realized she had come for him. The costume was uncomfortable, the voice modulator strange, but she played the role perfectly. Negotiating with Jabba while hiding her identity tested all her diplomatic skills. The moment when she freed Han from carbonite was worth all the risk. Seeing him alive, holding him as he struggled with hibernation sickness, whispering that someone who loved him was there, these seconds made the danger worthwhile. But Jabba had anticipated betrayal, and her capture was swift and humiliating. The metal bikini Jabba forced her to wear was meant to degrade her, to reduce her from warrior to ornament. She endured it with the same determination she had endured Imperial torture, knowing rescue would come, planning Jabba's death even as she sat at his throne. The chain that bound her would become the weapon that killed him. Luke's arrival as a Jedi Knight was shocking. The farm boy who had needed rescuing was gone, replaced by someone powerful and confident. Watching him face the rancor, negotiate with Jabba, and lead their escape showed how much he had grown. But there was also something sad in his eyes, a weight that hadn't been there before. The sail barge battle was cathartic. After so much running and hiding, fighting back felt wonderful. Strangling Jabba with the chain he had used to bind her was poetic justice. She took particular satisfaction in his death, this crime lord who had hurt so many. The explosion that destroyed his organization was beautiful from the skiff. The revelation that Luke was her brother should have been shocking, but somehow it made perfect sense. The connection she had always felt, the lack of romantic attraction despite their closeness, the way they could almost read each other's thoughts in battle, it all clicked into place. But it also meant Vader was her father, a truth harder to accept. Learning about her biological parents was complicated. Padme Amidala had been everything Leia admired, a queen and senator who fought for justice. But Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader, the monster who had tortured her and destroyed her world. How could she reconcile being the daughter of both? How could Luke ask her to forgive their father? The mission to Endor's moon to destroy the second Death Star's shield generator was supposed to be straightforward, but nothing involving the Empire ever was. Leading the strike team through the forest, working with the Ewoks, coordinating with the fleet, every aspect required her full attention. She couldn't afford to think about family revelations. Meeting Wicket and the Ewoks showed her that allies came in unexpected forms. These small, primitive beings were underestimated by the Empire, just as she had been underestimated for being young and female. Their courage in facing the technologically superior Imperial forces inspired her. They fought for their home with the same determination she had fought for hers. The moment when she was shot during the bunker assault was clarifying. As she lay wounded, watching Han panic about her injury, she realized how much she wanted to survive this war. Not just to see the Empire fall, but to have a life afterward. With Han, with Luke, with the family she had built from the ruins of the one she had lost. Han's jealousy about Luke before learning they were siblings was both frustrating and endearing. His vulnerability, hidden beneath jokes and bravado, showed how much he cared. When she told him Luke was her brother, his relief and immediate pivot to concern about her having Vader as a father was perfectly Han. The space battle above Endor, which she could only monitor from the moon, was agony. Knowing the fleet was being decimated while they struggled to destroy the shield generator added desperate urgency to their mission. Every second counted, measured in ships destroyed and lives lost. When they finally succeeded, the relief was overwhelming. The celebration after the Emperor's death and the second Death Star's destruction was bittersweet. They had won. The Empire was broken, but the cost had been astronomical. She thought of Alderaan, of all the worlds that had suffered, of all the people who hadn't lived to see victory. But she also allowed herself to feel joy, to dance with Han and hug Luke. The immediate aftermath of Endor was chaos. The Empire didn't simply disappear with the Emperor's death. Regional governors became warlords. The Imperial fleet fractured, and billions of beings accustomed to authoritarian rule suddenly had freedom. The new republic had to be built while still fighting the war, a challenge that would define the rest of her life. Her role in establishing the new republic was crucial. She had the diplomatic skills to negotiate between factions, the military experience to understand security needs, and the moral authority of someone who had sacrificed everything for freedom. But she also had enemies who remembered her as a rebel terrorist and questioned her right to lead. The marriage to Han was neither elaborate nor traditional. In the middle of ongoing conflicts and political negotiations, they found a moment to commit to each other officially. The ceremony was small, attended by their closest friends, officiating by Mon Mothma. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promising to face whatever came together. Pregnancy during the continuing conflict with Imperial remnants was challenging. Morning sickness during Senate debates, swollen ankles during military planning sessions, and the constant worry about bringing a child into an still unstable galaxy. But feeling the baby move, knowing she and Han had created life amid so much death, gave her hope. The birth of Ben Solo was the happiest moment of her life since Alderaan's destruction. Holding her son, seeing Han's wonder at this tiny person they had made, feeling the force potential Luke sensed in the baby, it all seemed to promise a better future. She had no idea how wrong things would go, how this moment of joy would become her greatest sorrow. Balancing motherhood with leadership was nearly impossible. The new republic needed her, but so did Ben. She tried to be present for both, often bringing him to Senate sessions as an infant, conducting diplomatic calls while nursing. Han tried to help, but struggled with conventional responsibility. Their different approaches to parenting created new tensions. The realization that Ben was incredibly strong in the Force was both pride and worry. She had learned more about her own Force sensitivity, but chose not to develop it, focusing on conventional leadership instead. But Ben needed training, and Luke was establishing his Jedi Academy. The decision to send Ben to train with Luke seemed right, but felt wrong. Her relationship with the Force remained complicated. She could feel it sometimes, especially in moments of extreme emotion or danger. Luke offered to train her, but she always declined. The Force was associated with Vader in her mind, with the power that had destroyed her world. She preferred the power that came from words and actions. Watching Ben leave for Jedi training was harder than any battle she had fought. He was so young, so eager to please his Uncle Luke, so desperate to understand his powers. She told herself it was necessary, that Luke would keep him safe, that the boy needed training she couldn't provide. But her mother's instinct screamed that she was making a mistake. The political challenges of the new republic were different from, but not easier than fighting the Empire. Democracy was messy, full of compromise and frustration. Former rebels wanted revolutionary changes, while systems that had prospered under the Empire resisted reform. She spent years building coalitions, making deals, accepting partial victories. The discovery that other imperial officials were organizing in the unknown regions was concerning but not surprising. Evil rarely died completely. It retreated, regrouped, and returned. She argued for maintaining military readiness, but the war-weary Senate wanted to demilitarize. Her warnings were dismissed as paranoia from someone who couldn't let go of the past. Her visits to Ben at the Jedi Academy were too infrequent. Senate sessions, diplomatic missions, and crises always seemed to intervene. When she did visit, she could see the darkness growing in him, the anger at her absence, the resentment at being sent away. But she didn't know how to fix it, how to be both the leader the galaxy needed and the mother Ben needed. The relationship with Han deteriorated under the strain. He couldn't handle conventional life, the responsibilities of being a husband to a prominent politician and father to a Force-sensitive child. He would disappear for weeks, returning with excuses about business opportunities. They loved each other, but love wasn't always enough to overcome fundamental incompatibilities. The night Ben became Kylo Ren was the worst of her life, surpassing even Alderaan's destruction. The reports were confused at first, something about an attack on the Jedi Temple, students dead, Luke missing. Then the horrible truth emerged. Ben had turned to the dark side, destroyed everything Luke had built, and disappeared into the void. The blame she placed on herself was crushing. She had sent him away, chosen duty over motherhood, repeated the mistakes of previous generations. Han blamed himself for being absent, for not understanding their son. Luke blamed himself for failing as a teacher. They were all right and all wrong, sharing responsibility for a tragedy none had intended. Her marriage to Han couldn't survive Ben's fall. They reminded each other of their failure, their lost son, their broken family. The separation wasn't angry, just sad. Two people who loved each other but couldn't heal together. Han returned to smuggling. She threw herself deeper into politics, both running from pain neither could face. The new Republic's willingness to ignore the rising First Order frustrated her beyond measure. She presented evidence of their military buildup, their recruitment of children, their superweapon development. But the Senate, tired of conflict, accused her of warmongering. Her reputation as Vader's daughter, revealed by political enemies, undermined her credibility. The formation of the resistance was her response to the new Republic's blindness. Using her own resources and calling in decades of favors, she built a military force to monitor and eventually fight the First Order. It was smaller than she needed, underfunded and understaffed, but it was something. She would not be caught unprepared again. Leading the resistance was different from her previous commands. These weren't idealistic rebels fighting clear evil, but professionals who understood the threat others ignored. They followed her from respect rather than hope, trusted her judgment when the rest of the galaxy questioned it. She was older, tireder, but also wiser and more determined. The development of Starkiller Base by the First Order vindicated her warnings, but brought no satisfaction. This weapon made the Death Star look primitive, capable of destroying entire systems rather than just planets. The new Republic's capital and fleet were destroyed in seconds, proving the cost of ignoring threats. She had been right, but being right meant nothing to the dead. The search for Luke became desperate after the First Order revealed itself fully. She needed her brother, needed the Jedi, needed hope to offer those who followed her. The map to his location, split between old Imperial records and R2-D2's memory banks, became her obsession. Finding Luke might not save the galaxy, but it would give them a fighting chance. When she sent Poe Dameron to Jakku for the final piece of the map, she knew the risks. The First Order wanted the same information, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill for it. But Poe was her best pilot, resourceful and dedicated. She trusted him to succeed where others might fail, though she couldn't have predicted how complicated the mission would become. Rey's arrival at the Resistance base stirred something in Leia she couldn't immediately identify. This young woman from nowhere, strong in the Force but untrained, reminded her of Luke when they had first met. But there was something more, a connection that went beyond simple Force sensitivity. She felt drawn to Rey, protective in ways that surprised her. Seeing Han again when he arrived with Rey and Finn was painful and wonderful simultaneously. Years had passed, but the love remained, complicated by loss and regret, but still real. They had both aged, worn down by grief and failure, but when he held her, she felt young again, remembering when they had believed they could save the galaxy and raise a family. The conversation with Han about their son was the most honest they had been in years. Both admitted their failures, their regrets, their enduring love for the boy Ben had been. When Han volunteered to try reaching Kylo Ren to bring their son home, Leia wanted to stop him. She sensed what would happen, felt the darkness waiting. But she also knew he needed to try. that both of them needed to believe Ben could still be saved. The moment Han died, she felt it through the Force like a physical blow. Across space, she knew the instant their son murdered his father. The pain was indescribable, worse than Alderaan, worse than Ben's fall, because this was their child destroying the man she loved. She had to continue commanding the evacuation from Starkiller Base while her heart shattered. The destruction of Starkiller Base was a victory that felt like defeat. They had stopped the immediate threat, but at the cost of Han's life, and with the knowledge that Ben was truly lost. The young heroes who destroyed the base, Rey and Finn and Poe, reminded her of herself and Han and Luke decades ago. But she was too tired and sad to feel hope. When Rey left to find Luke, Leia gave her blessing despite sensing the danger. The girl needed training only Luke could provide, and perhaps she could succeed where Leia had failed, bringing her brother back to the fight. The embrace they shared before Rey's departure was maternal, Leia pouring into it all the love she couldn't give her lost son. The evacuation of Dakar as the First Order fleet arrived showed that their victory at Starkiller Base had only delayed the inevitable. The Resistance was outnumbered, outgunned, and now the First Order could track them through hyperspace. What followed was not a battle, but a chase, a slow destruction of hope as ship after ship ran out of fuel and was destroyed. Her leadership during the chase was masterful despite impossible circumstances. She maintained morale when death seemed certain, made impossible decisions about who to save and who to sacrifice, and never showed the despair she felt. When others wanted to surrender or scatter, she held them together through force of will alone. The mutiny led by Poe hurt more than she showed. He was like a son to her, the pilot she relied on most, and his lack of faith in her chosen successor, Vice Admiral Holdo, felt personal. But she understood his frustration, his need to fight rather than run. She had been the same at his age, unable to accept that sometimes survival meant retreating. When the bridge was destroyed and she was blown into space, the Force saved her in ways she had never allowed before. Floating in the vacuum, dying, she reached out instinctively and pulled herself back to life and safety. It was the first time she had actively used the Force for more than sensing, and it left her drained. But it also showed that Skywalker's strength lived in her still. The recovery from her injuries took precious time they didn't have. While she lay unconscious, the Resistance nearly tore itself apart. Holdo's sacrifice, using the cruiser as a hyperspace ram to destroy the pursuing fleet, bought them time, but at tremendous cost. Another leader lost, another friend gone, another reminder that victory demanded sacrifice. Crate was supposed to be their grave. The old rebel base, abandoned for decades, offered minimal protection against the First Order assault. She sent the distress signal knowing no one would answer. The galaxy had abandoned them, too afraid or too indifferent to help. They would die alone, the last light of hope extinguished. Luke's arrival was everything and nothing she had hoped for. He wasn't really there, projecting himself through the Force in an act that she knew would kill him. But he gave them time to escape, face down their son with compassion rather than hatred, and reminded the galaxy that legends could still inspire. His apology for failing Ben was unnecessary. They had all failed. Feeling Luke's death was gentler than Han's, a peaceful release rather than violent ending. He had found the redemption he sought, saved the resistance without, taking a life, and faced his failure with courage. Through the Force, she felt his transition, not an ending, but a transformation. He was gone, but somehow still present. The escape from Crate with barely a dozen survivors should have been defeat, but Rey's arrival with the Falcon turned it into something else. They had lost everything, but they lived. The resistance was reduced to whoever could fit on one ship, but those who remained were the most dedicated. From such seeds, rebellions grew. Her training of Rey began immediately, not in the Force, but in leadership. The girl had power but lacked direction, strength but not strategy. Leia taught her what she had learned over decades, that power without purpose was meaningless, that leadership meant sacrifice, that hope was a choice made daily despite evidence suggesting despair. The connection she sensed between Rey and Ben troubled her. Through the Force, she could feel their bond, light and dark, calling to each other. It reminded her of the pull between herself and Han, opposites attracted despite logic. But this was more dangerous, potentially galaxy-ending if it went wrong. Building the resistance back from nothing required all her diplomatic skills and decades of contacts. Old allies were afraid, young ones were inexperienced, and resources were scarcer than ever. But she persisted, calling in favors, making promises, inspiring through example. Every new recruit, every donated ship, every hidden base was a small victory. The revelation that Palpatine had survived shattered her understanding of their victory at Endor. Everything they had sacrificed, all the death and struggle, and their greatest enemy had been manipulating events from the shadows. It explained the First Order, explained Ben's fall, explained the darkness that never seemed to fully retreat. Training Rey became her final mission. She poured everything into the girl, not just Force techniques, but wisdom earned through pain. She taught her about the burden of power, the temptation of the dark side, the importance of choosing light even when darkness seemed stronger. Rey was not her daughter, but she was her heir. The knowledge that Ben was struggling, that Han's memory haunted him and pulled him toward the light, gave her hope she thought had died. Through the Force, she could feel his confusion, his pain, his desperate desire to belong somewhere. He was still her son beneath Kylo Ren's mask, lost and angry, but not irredeemable. Her body was failing, worn out by decades of struggle, loss, and using the Force beyond her training. She hid it from others, projecting strength when she felt weak, authority when she felt lost. But she knew her time was limited, that she needed to prepare others for her absence. The night she reached out to Ben through the Force for the last time took everything she had left. Across the galaxy, she called to her son with all the love she still carried. Just one word, his true name, Ben, spoken with forgiveness and invitation. She felt him hear her, felt his soul crack open, felt the moment he chose to return to the light. The effort of reaching Ben killed her, but she died without regret. She had given him the push he needed to save himself, to save Rey, to save the galaxy. Her last sensation was peace, knowing that despite all the mistakes and tragedies, love had ultimately triumphed. The boy she had lost had found his way home. Her death was not an ending, but a transformation. Through the Force, she remained present, watching Ben's redemption, Rey's victory, and the final defeat of the Sith. She was reunited with Luke, with Han in his own way, with all those who had died for freedom. The Force welcomed her not as Leia Organa or Princess Leia or General Organa, but as herself, complete and at peace. Ben's sacrifice to save Rey, giving his life force to resurrect her, was the final proof that she hadn't failed as a mother. The love she had given him, imperfect and interrupted as it was, had survived the darkness. In his last moments, he was fully her son, choosing love over power, others over himself. The celebration across the galaxy after the First Order's defeat was what she had always fought for. Beings of every species on every world raising their voices in joy, understanding that tyranny had been defeated again. She wasn't there to see it physically, but through the Force she felt every moment of happiness, every tear of relief. Rey taking the Skywalker name honored not just Luke, but all of them. The orphan from Jakku became the heir to a complicated legacy of heroism and failure, light and dark, hope and despair. She would carry forward what was best in them while learning from their mistakes. The Resistance became the foundation for a new government, one built on the lessons learned from both the Old Republic's fall and the New Republic's blindness. Her surviving followers ensured that vigilance against tyranny became institutional rather than personal. No one person would have to carry the burden she had carried. Her legacy lived in the stories told about her across the galaxy. The princess who became a general, the diplomat who became a warrior, the woman who never gave up even when she lost everything. Young girls on countless worlds grew up knowing that strength came in many forms, that leadership was about service rather than power. The Force Ghost existence was different from life, but not lesser. She could be present for those who needed her, offering guidance to future generations facing their own darkness. With Luke, she watched new Jedi emerge, trained not in dogma but in balance. They had learned from the failures of the past. Her influence on government lasted generations. The structures she had helped build, the alliances she had forged, the principles she had defended became the foundation for lasting peace. Democracy remained messy and imperfect, but it endured because she had shown it was worth defending. The personal items she left behind became treasures to those who had loved her. Her senatorial gowns reminded people of her diplomatic brilliance. Her general's uniform spoke to her military leadership. But it was the simple clothes she wore in her final years, practical and unadorned, that best represented who she had become. The holograms she had recorded for Rey contained not just training, but motherly advice: how to navigate political situations, how to maintain hope during dark times, how to love despite loss. Rey would watch them repeatedly, finding new meaning as she grew into her own leadership role. Her reconciliation with Ben in the Force healed wounds that death couldn't touch. Free from the pressures and failures of life, they could finally just be mother and son. The love that had been twisted by circumstance and choices was restored, pure and unconditional. The influence she had on Han Solo outlasted his death. He had been a scoundrel who became a hero because she believed he could be better. His sacrifice trying to save Ben was the ultimate expression of the love she had nurtured in him. Even in death, he was still trying to be the man she had seen beneath the cynicism. The friendship with Luke that had begun in rescue and grown through revelation remained eternal. They were twins, separated at birth, reunited in war, bonded by blood and choice. In the Force, They were finally able to know each other without the weight of destiny and expectation. Her understanding of the Force evolved after death. She saw how it connected all living things, how individual choices rippled across the galaxy, how love and hope were as real and powerful as gravity or time. The mysticism she had resisted in life became clear truth in death. The example she set for female leaders resonated through time. She had been princess and senator and general, but always herself. She hadn't tried to lead like a man, but had brought her own perspective to power. Future generations of women in leadership would remember that strength and femininity were not contradictory. The military strategies she developed became textbook studies in asymmetric warfare. How to fight when outnumbered, how to maintain morale during retreat, how to turn weakness into strength. Military academies across the galaxy studied her campaigns, learning from both her victories and defeats. Her diplomatic techniques influenced generations of negotiators. The ability to find common ground between enemies, to build coalitions from disparate groups, to maintain principle while accepting compromise. These skills, learned through necessity and refined through practice, became the standard for peaceful conflict resolution. The love story with Han Solo became legend, told in countless variations across countless worlds. The princess and the smuggler, opposites who found completion in each other. Their relationship, imperfect and interrupted by war and loss, showed that love could endure even when happily ever after was impossible. Her role as a mother, complicated by Ben's fall and redemption, spoke to parents everywhere who struggled with difficult children. She showed that love didn't mean approval, that sometimes distance was necessary, that redemption was possible even after the worst betrayals. Her pain and perseverance gave hope to others facing similar struggles. The political philosophy she developed, balancing security and freedom, became influential in governmental theory. She had seen both extremes, the tyranny of the empire and the naivety of the new republic. Her writings on maintaining democracy while remaining vigilant against threats influenced constitutions on numerous worlds. As sleep finally approaches, let Leia's story settle into your mind like a comfortable blanket. She was a woman who faced impossible odds and never surrendered. She lost everything multiple times, but always found something new to fight for. She was royal and common, diplomatic and military, loved and lonely. Her journey from princess to general was not about titles, but about growth. She learned that leadership meant sacrifice, that love meant vulnerability, that hope was not passive but active choice. Every loss taught her something. Every victory cost something. Every year added weight she carried with grace. The Force flows through her story, connecting moments across decades. The infant hidden from the Empire became the woman who helped destroy it. The sister who kissed her brother before knowing their connection became the teacher who prepared Rey for final victory. Every moment mattered. Every choice had consequences. Rest now, knowing that Leia's fight continues in every person who stands against tyranny, who chooses hope despite evidence for despair, who leads with compassion rather than fear. Her example lives on, inspiring generations to fight for what's right even when victory seems impossible. Dream of a princess who became so much more, who proved that strength comes in many forms, who showed that leadership is about service rather than power. Let her courage inspire your dreams, her determination strengthen your rest, her hope illuminate your sleep. The galaxy far, far away is safer because she lived, freer because she fought, better because she never gave up. Her story is complete, but her influence is eternal, rippling through space and time like waves in the Force, touching lives she never knew, inspiring heroes she never met. Sleep peacefully, carried into dreams by the tale of Princess Leia Organa, General Organa, sister, wife, mother, leader, hero. Her story whispers that we all have the power to resist evil, to choose hope, to fight for others, to leave the world better than we found it. In your dreams tonight, perhaps you'll stand beside her on the bridge of a resistance cruiser, facing impossible odds with determination. Perhaps you'll feel the Force flowing through all living things, connecting every soul in an eternal web of possibility. Rest well, knowing that in every galaxy, in every story, in every heart that chooses hope over fear, Leia Organa's spirit lives on. The princess who became a general, the diplomat who became a warrior, the woman who never stopped fighting for freedom, even when freedom cost everything she loved. Her lore surrounds you now, complete and comforting, a reminder that heroes are not born but made through choices, that leadership is not about power but responsibility, that hope is not naive but necessary. Close your eyes and let her story guide you into peaceful sleep, where dreams of distant galaxies and noble causes await. The Force will be with you, always, just as it was with her, just as it is with all who choose light over darkness, hope over despair, love over fear. Sleep now, with Leia's courage as your guardian, her hope as your light, her story as your guide into dreams where anything is possible, and heroes always rise when they're needed most. The princess, the general, the legend watches over your rest, reminding you that tomorrow brings new chances to make the world better. Rest peacefully in the knowledge that her story, though complete, continues in everyone who heard it and chose to be better, to fight harder, to hope longer. You carry a piece of her legacy now, a small flame of rebellion against darkness, a whisper of hope in the vast night. Dream well, guided by the lore of Princess Leia, General Leia, Forever Leia, whose light shines eternal in the Force and in the hearts of all who believe that good can triumph, that love can endure, that hope can survive even the darkest night.